Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws Podcast with East Forest. I am that East Forest. This week, I have a really cool conversation with Peter Broderick. If you don't know who he is, and I think many of you do, but if you don't, he's an amazing musician, a multi-instrumentalist. He's got his own work, and he's collaborated and produced all sorts of people. I mean, anything from like Nils Frahm to M. Ward, Greg Haines. He was in the band Efterklang for many years, and we get into an incredible story about how he ended up being in that band. But he's someone who has been on my radar for a long time, and I had the honor to reach out to him for the Ramdas reworks. And we were graced enough for him to say yes, that he wanted to do a rework. So he reworked the song Home. And if you haven't checked that out, please do. It came out on all platforms on this last Friday, the 15th. So that is the Home Peter Broderick rework. And it's pretty fun, super fun. So check it out, share it, let us know what you think. And we'll keep on to this journey of folks diving into the Ramdas material, different artists, and doing their reworks of the album. And we've got a few more to come before the end of the year, and we'll continue to share them with you. And I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation. And it's really interesting why he chose this track, and I didn't know why he did, and now I see how it's such a personal connection to sort of what Ramdas says about how psilocybin started him on the spiritual track, as it did me, well, as it did Peter as well. So stay tuned for that in this episode. I am about to head to China. As a matter of fact, when this comes out, I'm in China. And so I'm recording this in advance because I don't even know if I'm going to be able to so I hear in China you can't even load certain web pages and so forth. And for all I know, East Forest Podcast is banned from China. It is unknown, but in a measure of keeping things in a timely manner, I'm recording this for you now so that you guys can have your entertainment and your predictability of the East Forest 10 Laws Podcast weekly. That being said, I will give you all my China updates and insights very soon in the next episode. I might take the Thanksgiving week off, so if you don't see an episode on the Tuesday, Wednesday as I normally release it, fear not. I'll be back the next week there in early December. I guess I'm going out to the Ramdas retreat that week, but I'll figure it out. Don't you worry. A lot of times I say I'm going to take time off, and then I don't. I just get excited to talk to y'all, and I end up releasing something. And I've been thinking about more meditations and thinking about recording another one of those for you. So, if you guys have questions or comments or like types of meditations you'd like or ideas or people you'd like me to have conversation with, let me know. Just reach out at info@eastforest.org and let's make this a conversation. Let me know what might be interesting or useful to you, or I'm always happy to answer your questions or just as a point of a starting point for conversation. But thank you for all of you who have reviewed the podcast. We finally crossed that 100 ratings mark on Apple Podcasts. I think we're right now, when I was last looked at it, it's 101. And I want to thank Honeybee333 for leaving a written review that just says, thank you for doing what you do. You bet. You're welcome. It's really easy to leave a written review. You just scroll down there to the very bottom when you have internet service. Just hit the tap on the 5 stars and then it says write a review, and then you just write a little review. I mean, come on, it takes like a minute. I like to see it, but other people, more importantly, it helps them think that, hey, yeah, I'll give this podcast a try. I'll dive in. So thank you for reviewing this podcast. And if you're listening on Spotify or Stitcher or wherever else you listen to podcasts, thank you for sharing it in your social medias and sending it out to your friends and helping this free offering continue to proliferate into the world. It's kind of a fun time of year. I just came up from Boulder, so I'm in Boise to be based out of here with Rada for most of the winter. I took dog back to Karina, my ex, and we had a nice lunch, and I'm hoping to see the little puppy again soon. But I'm wrapping up my work here on the music studio space here in Boise, and it's coming along. Shout out to the city of Boise, Inspector Tony, for being such a cool guy and allowing us to finish this thing. But I'm actually like getting into the stage of furniture and like finishing the tile and just the trim. And then it's like all I have to do is work on acoustical treatments, and then I can start plugging shit in and making music for y'all. So that's really why I'm doing this, is because I need a place up here to properly mix and hear music. And I know it's a lot of work to put a room together just so you can hear something right. But hey, man, priorities, right? After this, I'm building another sauna up here in Boise. I've got plans for another wood-fired sauna. So I'll keep you updated on those projects. My goal is to get the music studio completely done by Christmas. That's the Christmas gift to myself that will just keep on giving if all goes well. All right, let's get into this conversation. This is Mr. Peter Broderick.
Psilocybin is my friend. Psilocybin got me onto the spiritual path.
Because you and I both grew up in Oregon. I grew up in Salem, and I think you were in Carlton. Is that right? It's a little town.
Yeah, I was in Carlton, which is near McMinnville, Newburgh, Yamhill County, about an hour from Portland. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always, somewhere I picked that up. That's where you were from, and I was like, oh, Peter's kind of an Oregon guy, but you've definitely spread your wings and made your way, seems like, to many different places in Europe, right? I mean, you lived in Denmark, Berlin, Ireland, and now you're in London.
That's
and I'm
right.
guessing there might be other places as well.
Those are the main places I've lived, and since I moved to Denmark when I was 20, so I've lived in Europe for most of my adult life now. But yeah, Carlton, Oregon's where I grew up. I was actually born in Maine, actually, but when I was 3.5 or 4, my family picked up and got in a Volkswagen van and drove over to Oregon.
Your parents sound like free-spirited. They changed their names, move across the country, and they have a son like you. So
yeah, absolutely. They were hippies, and I say that in the most loving way. My mother was a yoga teacher when I was a kid, and that was in the 90s, before yoga was really the big
an industry
fad that it is now. Yeah, an industry. My friends at school thought my mom was leading devil worship workshops or something, and I myself didn't really know what she was doing, but I knew it wasn't bad. But my parents are great. They're super supportive and totally get what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And they're just the best. I love them.
Well, I want to talk a bit about the rework you did for the Ram Dass album, but what we're talking about now helps me connect the dots personally, and I think it'll help connect others' dots as well, because I'm trying to figure out a little bit the what you do and the why you do it, and certainly I understand it pretty well on the level of like I do something similar, but you are so prolific, and you have such a sense of, at least it's from the outside point of view, but a sense of joy about what you create because it's diverse. And I just see you taking risks and kind of seemingly to do what you want to do. And you seem to have done that your entire career. And there's like a lightness to that creatively that I find really admirable. And is there something that happened that you can kind of connect the dots for yourself in your own upbringing, or like what it is that led you to have that sense of being? Or if I'm totally off base and you're like, it's been totally methodical?
No, that completely makes sense to me that it would come across that way. And it feels that way to me. I really have this feeling of like, I'll do one thing, I'll write some songs on the guitar, say, and then record those. And then I'll say, okay, now I want to make some music that doesn't have any guitar or my voice or whatever was used in that thing. And, I've always been really curious about different instruments. When I was a teenager, I started collecting instruments. I would go over to friends' houses and look in their garage or their attic and see an accordion collecting dust and say, "Can I have that?" And there was a time where it felt like I was getting a new instrument every week. And I had this massive collection of instruments, and I really loved all the different sounds. And, I would get really excited about bands that use sort of, non-traditional instruments, in their music, like the musical saw or the theremin, or, these really bizarre things that you don't see that often. So, yeah, it started very young for me, that I just was very curious about all these different things. And, I've often wondered if, because sometimes I'll see someone who's devoted their life to one very specific practice, whether it's an instrument or a style of music, and they really refine it over time. And you see just this straight line of their progression with the thing. And sometimes I feel a bit envious about people like that. I think, part of what I do is probably some element of it is a little bit of sort of, I don't want to say laziness. That sounds too bad. But, sometimes, let's say I'm playing the guitar, and then, I could put in some work to actually go some places that I can't physically do yet. But rather than do that, I think, I'll just go play the piano for a while. you know? So I've often wondered how much of it is the curiosity and how much of it is the sort of unwillingness to stick with one thing through those sort of rough patches, if you know what I mean. But for whatever reason, for whatever reason, I just really enjoy doing that. It keeps me stimulated and wide-eyed, and like you say, it keeps the process joyous for me. And that's I can't think of anything more important than that, really.
Right. Like, why else are you doing it?
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever thought about that? The limitations you might have on an instrument technically becomes an asset to the songwriting. It doesn't let it get
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, or at least I like to think that about my piano playing, because it's only as good as it is, and it makes the work simple.
I am such a firm believer in that you don't need technical skill or good equipment to make good art. You don't need to. Some of my favorite music is by people who aren't musicians at all, and they record themselves on GarageBand with a built-in laptop mic. Like those, whatever tools you have, you can make good art with it, I think. And so I have to remind myself sometimes like that, if I see someone playing an instrument and I think, if only I could be that good. But it's not about that. It's just about creating and getting a powerful feeling when you create, right?
Well, what is it when you sit down, or I don't know if you sit down to make music or if you're just always sort of in a playful state of letting it come out when it does, but if it's someone like you who's moving around a lot, if you're starting to gather up equipment and stuff, I would imagine you have to let some of that go as you move to a new place, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so you are outputting a lot. I mean, do you go to studios, or do you just do it super DIY? Are you getting, like, are you mixing your own stuff, for instance? And can you do that without a critical listening environment?
Well, yes, I do believe that you can do that. But, over the years, I've done everything from, make records with a laptop in my bedroom to, or even a 4-track cassette recorder, to working in really hi-fi studios. And, so it depends on the project nowadays. If it depends, let's say I'm doing some music for a film and there's a decent budget, I might try and hire some other musicians and some people who are good at the technical stuff. But I also, at this point, have worked so much on my own, just with some recording software on my own computer, that I feel pretty comfortable with the sounds I can get. And I even feel sometimes a bit impatient when I'm in a recording studio now, because there's that layer of communication you have to kind of get across to whoever the engineer is, what you want it to sound like. Whereas when I record at home, there's much more of a flow to it for me. It depends on who you're working with, of course, but yeah. So I do it all. But like I say, I do believe that you can make good stuff with minimal technical equipment and know-how.
Yeah. So what is the creative inspiration for you when you're sitting down to work? I mean, is it just sort of is it sort of like, I want to just enjoy this and have fun? Is that the fuel that's firing it, or is it more project specific? And you're just kind of, maybe it's like you've set out a set of parameters like that you want to paint within. Like, I only like no piano on this, and then let's just see what happens.
Yeah, it tends to be more that way, and since I've been making my living as a musician for over a decade now, about 12 years, and a lot of that time has been spent doing commissioned work, whether it's for film or dance or maybe also helping other people produce their own recordings. So in those situations, the project itself has these parameters, as you say, that sort of I like to think of them as a box around the project, and that box is very clearly defined. But then you get inside there and you have those tools, and then you sort of push at the edges of that box and see how much you can stretch it out. And so yeah, a lot of the projects are like that. And I also really like, when I'm making an album just of my own accord. My most recent project I did was when I moved to London. I had a set of songs I'd written on the guitar, and I thought, I really want to just make a bedroom album. I want to record the whole thing in my bedroom. So I just did that, even with drums and stuff. I had this tiny space, but I really wanted to make it all happen in the bedroom. So I did that, and those kind of parameters really are helpful for me.
I think for any good art, having limitations usually makes it better. I certainly find that myself, and especially now, because with sounds and libraries of sounds, you can sit there endlessly choosing things, and I don't know, it feels a certain washed out quality when it doesn't come from a grounded place of choice.
Yeah. I mean, I once, the first few records I did were very, they all had specific themes. The first one, I really wanted to focus on piano and strings. And then the next one, I said, okay, I'm not going to use any piano or strings. This is going to be a guitar and voice album. And then somewhere down the line, I thought, okay, I'm going to make a record where I don't have any limitations at all. And it almost didn't get done. It dragged on for years and years and years. And it just, it got to the point where I was like, I couldn't tell, should I add more? Should I take stuff away? I was so lost in it. And at some point I just had to just kind of call it good where it was at. And it was a real struggle.
What was that record?
The name of the record is really annoying. It's a website URL. It's called http://www.itstartshere.com.
Well, that's probably a real site, right?
Well, it was a real site, and at the time it came out, my whole idea behind it. This is a ridiculous story, but I'm going to tell it because we're on.
No, let's get into
subject.
It, man.
But when I was making the songs, I was thinking, this was in 2012 it came out. So it was around 2009 and 10 that I got started. And all the songs had real specific stories behind them. One was about a friend who had passed away. Another was about a letter exchange I had with another friend. And they all had these stories behind them. And I wanted to make these big liner notes, or even like a book that could come with the record. And then I thought, who's going to get that now? What percentage of the listeners will see that? Because so much of us live in this digital world, and even more so now. This was a decade ago, so it was even less. But even at that point, I was wondering, who's going to see this if I make a book that goes with this? So I started just thinking about that, and I thought, I really want all the listeners to have the access to the same material. Whether they buy the record physically or they download it or they're streaming it. So my solution to that was to give the album a title that's a website. So you go there, and then on that website, there's a page for each song and all this description and credits and all that. And it was open. It was also open to the public for comments, and I got lots and lots of comments on there. I eventually just, you have to pay to keep a website up. So after 10 years of it going, I thought, I'm just going to let this go now. But yeah.
Was that record in collaboration with Nils Frahm, or am I incorrect?
It was indeed. Yeah, he produced that record.
So this is when you were in Berlin, I presume.
Yes.
Okay.
And and that was, Nils was kind of one of the main reasons I moved to Berlin and toward the end of 2009, beginning of 2010. I had become really good friends with him, and we were collaborating a lot at that time. I produced a record of his before that, and then, I asked him to produce that one for me. And so, yeah, we had this kind of this collaborative thing going pretty strongly for a while.
Amazing. Yeah, I listened today to the Olive Ray record. I really like it. I really like that. Yeah, it's got some beautiful stuff on it.
Yeah. Those are mine and Nils's middle names put together, Oliver and Ray.
Okay. I was wondering.
It's not the easiest band name. So many of these side projects of mine, like my collaborations, I look back years later and I think, why didn't we just use our real names? Right. I made a record with my friend called Greg Haines, and we called the record
he's great.
Greg Gives Peter Space.
I like that title. Yeah, I thought that was clever.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I liked it. It just kind of made me think, and then it made me, I don't know, it was visual. It gave me an image in my head. Greg, man, you're the who you've collaborated with and walked paths with in the last 10, 12 years is incredible. I mean, it
really is. It blows me
it
away.
Really
as
is.
Well.
It really is. I mean, and I don't even know where to start. And we don't have to sit here and talk about everyone you've worked with, but at the same time, I'm just trying to figure out the special sauce in your personality that's led to you. There's all that happening. Let's go back to is it Efterklang, right?
Efterklang, yeah. The Danish band.
Is it true
that
you, I've heard some of their music. I listened to it. I just never taken a deep dive. But they have a side project I saw, maybe recently.
Yeah, they had another band called Lima for a little while.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
but that story in itself is a total fairy tale story.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, if it's true that it's from MySpace.
Yes.
And you ended up being in this band from MySpace, so then 5 years of touring.
Do you remember MySpace?
Of course, I remember Friendster. Okay. I'm older than you.
It's funny because I feel like a lot of people feel really nostalgic towards MySpace now. And I do myself. It was
you should.
At the time at the time it came out, it was just such a nice way of connecting with musicians all around the world, and there really hadn't been anything like it before.
It was new, yes.
We weren't all jaded on all the social media stuff back then. Mm-hmm. It was just new and exciting. So, but yeah, I first heard Efterklang when I was just riding in a friend's car in Portland. He had some music on, and I said, "What is this?" And he pulled out the CD, and I saw it was Efterklang. So I went to the CD store, Music Millennium, I believe, in Portland, Oregon, if you know it. Yeah,
of course.
And I picked up Efterklang's album Tripper, and I was totally obsessed with it. It just was unlike anything I'd ever heard. That album in particular is very different from what they're doing nowadays. It's darker, and it's quite heavily orchestrated with strings and horns, but it's got this kind of dark, almost clinical electronic edge to it as well. And it just, at the time I was 18 years old or so, and it blew my mind. And when I started a MySpace page, they were the first people I sent a friend request to. And then, I don't know if you remember, but on MySpace, you'd have this thing called Top Friends. Oh, yeah. Where you would put
Tom.
Tom would be automatically your number one friend, but you could rearrange it and put, and this was a bit, this social hierarchy. You'd be checking in on your friends to see where you were in their top friends and if you had moved or whatever.
It was the beginning. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But in Efterklang's top friends, I saw Casper, who's the singer. He had a personal profile. So I clicked on that and I sent him a friend request. And the next day I wake up and there's a message from Casper and it's like, "Oh, Peter, thanks for the friend request. I see that you play the musical saw." I had some recordings for musical saw up on my page at the time. He's like, "That's such a cool instrument." And I write back to him. I'm like, "Oh my God, you guys are like my favorite band. I would love to send you some music. Can I have your address?" So this guy gives me his address in Denmark. And, I wasn't giving this music to anyone in Oregon, maybe my family, maybe a few close friends, but nobody took me seriously, really. I played in a lot of bands. I was a accompanist and side guy, but when it came to making my own stuff, there was no one in Oregon who, looked at me like that. But I had these aspirations. So to get this, this interest from, well, I mean, I don't know how interested he was at the start, but when I started sending him CDs, anytime I'd make something new, I'd burn a CD and I'd send it to Casper. And he would always respond with the most thoughtful, sweet feedback. And it really kept me going. And so we kind of kept this relationship for a couple years. And then one day out of the blue, I can remember the exact moment. I was on tour with a band from Portland called Horse Feathers, who I played in with for many years. And we were in Boston or Cambridge. What's that place called? TT the Bears.
Yeah,
it's a place a lot of American touring acts know. And we were parked outside across the street in front of a Walgreens, and I'm sitting there trying to get on Walgreens Wi-Fi to check my email. And I go to my MySpace, and there's a message from Efterklang, and I can even remember the subject line. It said, Efterklang Live and Wild Ideas. And they said, "Hey, Peter, we're looking for someone to join our live band who plays violin. And we know this is a crazy idea, but we wondered if you might ever consider moving to Denmark and touring with us for the next couple of years. And on top of that, supporting the shows as a solo act."
Come on.
So, I mean,
they're committing to like that, like years.
And there wasn't any clips of me on YouTube. They were just basing this on these CDRs I'd burned and sent to Casper. So
that's unbelievable.
Years later, I find out that the way this really went down is they were all sitting there talking about their live band. And, Casper kept saying, "Yeah, we really need someone like this guy, Peter Broderick, that plays all these instruments." And, and they're like, "Yeah, but he's in America." And they kept thinking of people. And he kept saying it like, "Yeah, we just need someone like this guy, Peter Broderick." And finally, one of the guys just said, "Well, why don't you just ask him?" So, I had never played a single solo show in my life.
Come on. Seriously?
Here I was being offered to go and support this band and play with them. I didn't own a passport. I'd never been outside the U.S. aside from a couple trips to Mexico with my family when I was a kid. 2 months later, I was living in Denmark.
How old were you?
20. I couldn't even buy a beer in Oregon.
God. Unbelievable. And you went there by yourself.
Yeah.
Good for
pretty
you.
Crazy.
and you did indeed become a member of the band for many years.
Yeah,
right?
I toured with them all around the world for 5 years. And the first couple years, I supported almost all of the shows. So I was playing 2 shows every night. And I went on to play with them for 5 years. They're still very good friends of mine. We cross paths every now and again. I wouldn't be surprised if one day we do some work together again. But yeah, they're like my family, and they really showed me the ropes with all this music stuff.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
What an amazing education. I imagine you met a lot of these people that you ended up knowing over the years through that experience.
That's right. Booking agents, concert promoters, label representatives, all these people, when you're playing shows like 200 days out of the year, you meet a lot of people in the music industry, and so I made a lot of connections that way.
That's so wild. And so
It is.
you've just been in Europe more or less that time. Am I correct, though? You did come back to the States after that HTTPS album.
Yeah, that's right. And I spent 2.5 years in Denmark. Then I moved to Berlin for a few years, and then I was kind of feeling like, it's funny because when I moved to Denmark, I thought, this is my ticket. George Bush was in office, George W. Bush, and the perception of America from abroad at that time was just kind of a joke. And I mean,
it's better now.
Yeah, it's better now. I was going to say it's funny to say that now because if it was
George
a joke,
Bush, he's like,
if it was
great. Let's
George
get him
Bush,
back.
I mean, he's doing his paintings and all that now. He seems lovely.
He's chill. Yeah.
But yeah, at the time I thought this is my ticket out, and I just didn't ever envision going back. But sure enough, after about 6 years in Europe, I kind of felt like, oh man, I would love to just be near my mom again for a while. And I actually got a bit sick. I kept having some recurring health issues in Berlin. I thought, I'm just going to go be by my family for a while and get out of the big city. I moved to a little coastal town in Oregon and was just, that's when my life really changed a lot. And that's also when psilocybin got me on the spiritual path.
Oh, did it? I did not know this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you want to segue into this Ram Dass rework.
I do. Man, there's so many. I just want to say one side note. You're telling that beautiful story of how you essentially reached out to that band and they wrote back and you were overjoyed and how it changed your life. And it wasn't quite the same experience for me, but I did reach out to you quite a while ago, long time ago. I was just starting out and I somehow came across your music, and I think it was something about the Oregon and even the Berlin bit. I'm half German. I've gone to Berlin a few times. I toyed around with like, maybe I'd go to Berlin, but you wrote me back, and most people don't, know? And you wrote back a very sweet message, kind of like the one you said, just saying like, oh, that's really nice to hear. And, thanks for writing, and all the best from Berlin or wherever you were. And that was really left an impression on me to this day, that now when people write me, I try to write everyone back if I can, even if it's a short message, because of that, because I'm like, why not? It's like, we're all just people. And there have been things now in my life where, like actually one of the reworks that's happening from Nick Mulvey, I didn't know Nick, but he just had commented on something like in stories of Instagram. And I happened to pick up on his name and I was like, I should reach out to him, and there's just these small connections that, these create these webs in our lives. I mean, what an incredible change it made for you. You moved to Denmark, you toured for 5 years, you did all the, and now you're in London. It's incredible.
When you first reached out to me about the Ram Dass rework, I didn't remember that first correspondence we had, but a couple weeks later, though, I was searching for that email from you, and I came across in my inbox the one from years before. It was still there.
Oh my God, I don't even remember what I said. Do you know what year it was?
I've got it right here. Hang on.
This is amazing.
Yeah, it was. I think it was 2013. Let me see.
It feels like a long time ago to me.
No,
I was in Portland.
Actually was 2015. Is that right?
Okay. It could be. I was in Portland.
No, sorry. It's 2013.
Okay.
December 11th, 2013.
Well, we're coming up on our anniversary, Peter.
Note. Yeah.
That's cool. What did I have to say? I hope it was not too good. You
talked about discovering my music and that it felt sort of aligned with your own sort of sensibilities, and you're thanking me for offering my gifts, as you say, and you say that you're based in Portland, so that definitely piqued my interest, and then you sent me a link to your Prana record, and so I must have given that a listen at the time, and then I wrote you just a quick note back, and yeah.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, here we are, and I remember actually. So when the Ram Dass thing came up, and I was thinking about people to reach out to, and initially it was sort of a very broad group. It was almost more in the dance direction, but that just wasn't happening, you know?
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then the people, the first group that said yes was Hammock. And
Yeah.
I was like, fantastic. So,
Yeah.
and then that happened really quickly a long time ago. And then I was like, well, let's reach out to some more people in that world, really the world I'm in, which starts to make more sense.
Yeah.
And then it just
Yeah.
completely flowed naturally. And
Cool.
of course, your name came up in my mind. And I said, of course I can reach out to Peter. He wrote back several years ago, so he'll read it. He'll get it. And you did. So I'm really happy that it worked out and you did this.
Yeah.
You did
I mean,
this
it's
rework.
honestly, it's such an honor, man. I mean, you know, Ram Dass is such a legend.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, this opportunity has given me a good excuse to go and sort of dig deeper into his life and his teachings and all that. And it's been very deeply rewarding for me.
Yes, me too. Yeah. And tell me about why you chose to do the song Home, which is about Ram Dass's first experience with psilocybin and how he credits it with starting him on his spiritual path.
Yeah.
And that was the lyric that you focused in on. And I'm really curious to hear about how that resonates with you personally in your own life.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's such an interesting time in our culture because, you know, there was a time when you know, back when
London
Ram Dass was with Timothy Leary, and they had this sort of where was it, at Harvard? They had the go ahead to do all this research with psychedelics, and they were really discovering such revolutionary things. And but then it all got shut down, and it was like that for many years. So you had all these people having these revelations in private, but you know, we've had to kind of keep it on the hush hush. But I feel in the last few years, I see more and more people speaking out about this, and then in turn more research projects getting the green light, and so we're sort of opening up to discover these things a bit more, and so I'm one person who's tremendously excited about that because. And when I heard that lyric come on in the song, you know, the first thing he says is, "Psilocybin is my friend. Psilocybin got me on the spiritual path." And I had to smile so big because, you know, the exact same thing happened for me.
Me too.
You know, I'd like to think now that we're all spiritual beings, whether we even realize it or not. And even if I look at the way I lived my life before having a so-called spiritual awakening, you know, it was all very spiritual, whether I realized it or not. But for me, that conscious, that becoming conscious of my own spirituality, you know, psilocybin opened that up to me big time. And that had happened right around the time that I moved back to Oregon. I'd had a couple, you know, experiences in Berlin, but when I got back to Oregon, one night I was, you know, I had been away for 6 years, so I was spending lots of time just going around Portland, reveling in all the delicious food and drinks. And, you know, Portland's so amazing for all that, right?
Especially then and now.
Yeah. So I was just so blown away by that. And I had such a big smile on my face just being home. And I was having all these amazing coincidences happen where I was bumping into people, and it all just felt like I was in the right place at the right time. And I had this thought of wanting to explore mushrooms or psilocybin a bit more. And one night I was just sitting outside a bar having a drink by myself. And this guy comes around the corner and says, "Does anybody want mushrooms?" And I said, "Yep." And and that night I ate some right away. And an hour or so later, I start riding my bike back to where I was staying at the time, and it was just, you know, you can imagine it just was such an amazing bike ride. And
this is like the LSD story. Yeah. Where
it is. What's his name? Albert Hoffman, right?
Yeah.
He was on his
bike ride.
Yeah.
The first trip.
And I mean, that night was just amazing. I stopped off to get some water, and even the idea of water was so amazing to me. Just to drink some water, it just it was so powerful. And I stopped off, and there were a couple homeless guys outside this shop, and you know how we can be with homeless people sometimes. We might smile at them or give them a coin, but it's kind of like, you know, we're a bit reluctant to connect. A lot of us, most of the time. I know I am. But I just was all ears for these guys. I stopped and I talked to them for, I don't know how long it was, honestly, but I became really quite good friends with them, and I went back searching to find one of them many times. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But so yeah, I had this amazing experience, and I had some more of the mushrooms, and I decided to save them for. I was taking a trip down to LA a couple of weeks later, so I thought I'm going to save these and go into the redwoods. And so I had this absolutely amazing experience where I went down to the redwoods. I found myself a little cabin, and I had a little light meal, and then I ate these mushrooms, and I walked out the door with pretty much nothing in my hands, and just walked into the woods. And soon enough, the visuals start kicking in, and my whole night, I can't even really describe what happened that night. It was just so surreal and supernatural. But the amazing thing is that at some point it got so dark that I couldn't find my way out of where I was going. And so I just decided to sit down and kind of meditate until the daylight came. And I wasn't scared at all. That was the most amazing feeling. I was soaking wet. I had been splashing around in a river that I found, and I was really cold, but I was so calm inside. And I just sat there and I breathed very deeply for, hours and hours and hours until the daylight came. And so daylight finally comes, and I start walking back to my cabin, and I realize on the way that I had lost the key. So I get back to the cabin, and I managed to climb in through the window and get a couple hours of rest before I have to check out. And then I go to the checkout, and I tell the woman the whole story minus the mushrooms. I was out exploring in the woods, and it got dark, and I lost my key. And she said, "Oh, you poor thing. There's a killer on the loose in this area right now."
Come on, a killer.
And I said, "What?" She said, "Oh yeah, a few days ago, a man killed his entire family and then disappeared, and the FBI have been out here searching for him."
God.
So I'm thinking, okay, first of all, thank God this guy didn't find me. Second of all, thank God that FBI didn't see me splashing around in this river by myself. I mean, they could have just shot
There's
me down.
The guy.
But
yeah.
Anyway, that's a funny story, but the more important part is the experiences that I had and just what that did to my whole being, and how that's really changed my life. And so when I heard that line from Ram Dass, I just felt like, yeah, let's just mantra this, let's just let this line repeat, and just, I feel like people are ready for this right now. They want to hear this, and I want to hear it. So yeah,
it seems like, if I'm tracking this correctly, you toured for 5 years, you had a lot of growth. At some point, you made lots of records, and you started working on one where you had no limits with Nils Frahm. And something burned out there, or something happened.
Yes.
You were getting sick. Your body was responding. You moved back to Oregon, and it's sort of like a little dark night of the soul time. It's sort of time for a reconnection. The body's saying slow down. The soul is saying it's time to. You're sort of given the mushrooms, and it sounds like you did have a kind of rejuvenation.
Absolutely, I really did, and it just. It opened up my connection to the natural world. I mean, since that time, before I started making a living from music, my passion was music. I had a job making pizza, and I went to school, but, with my free time, I'd be making music, and that was what I loved to do. But once music kind of became my job. And I think this is partially why I burned out. It got all in, when things get entwined with money, they can get a bit tricky sometimes, or, I might take on a job that I don't necessarily want to do, but I need the money. So, so then music becomes a bit tainted with all this stuff. Right. And I kind of was missing that. I was like, so what's my thing now? And after, after in the last few years, especially since I moved back to Oregon and had those very powerful experiences with the natural world, nature has really become my passion. I've gotten so into herbalism and foraging. My absolute favorite thing to do is to go out and pick wild greens and berries and mushrooms, wild food. That's really my big thing now. It's like the relationship that I had with music before it became my job.
You have to know what you're doing to do that, don't you? With
You
the local
do,
area.
yeah. And I've made a few mistakes and hopefully learned from them. It's I have a huge collection of books about foraging, and I've done a few workshops with people. And the amazing thing is that the more you do, the more comfortable you get, and you start to get this, more intuitive. You get in touch more intuitively with your senses. I think when plants have a certain bitterness to them or something, we can tell what's good for our bodies if we're really in touch with things. And I wouldn't say I'm fully there yet, but I've certainly developed a lot of that. That's come a long way for me over the years.
I'm down here in southern Utah right now in the Four Corners, and there's a school here called the Boulder Outdoor Survival School. And
oh, wow.
One of the teachers there, a friend of mine, Dave Holliday, he's a total wild man. He lived in a cave for a long time.
Wow.
Finally, but he's a great guy, great spirit. And when I was out hiking with him, he's showing me little things that I can eat and picking up these little wild tubers in the ground. And I said, how did you learn all of this? And he says, you just try things, and some things make you sick and some things don't. And after a long time, and you get really in tune with that stuff, and really in tune. And then you start to get an intuition about it. And
Absolutely.
then there only are so many plants in one area, right? So eventually you've learned them.
It's so funny. Like, so many people think now, like, oh my God, how did people figure out what to eat? It must have been such a weird trial and error. So many people died and got sick. And it's like, actually, have you ever considered the possibility that those people were so much more in tune intuitively with what their body needs and what is good for their body, that it wasn't trial and error. It was communication with the plant world, or whatever, whether it's fungi or animals or whatever. It's communication with the universe about what your body needs. And I really believe that. And you can, like that guy, like he feels it for himself, and I feel it developing in myself when I spend the time diving into that a bit.
Oh, for sure. There's an author named Ken Carey, and his books are sort of channeling of sorts, but he claims that the way it started for him was he and his family moved out of the city and onto a farm and just were getting into this complete natural rhythms. And after years of this, all of a sudden, this stuff just was there flowing through him out onto the page, but it wasn't before.
Wow.
And
wow.
I think a lot about creativity and art and how we're sort of these mechanisms of an antenna, right? Of just sort of like what makes us sort of be unique as humans is our ability to be creative. And what are the things that perhaps stunt that or funnel it or filter it?
Sure.
And probably the things that make us the most human and that have been with us for millions of years, like you're talking about, probably help you out. They help the system and the machine work at its best.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, like, a day spent out, it's like meditation as well. Like some people think like, but I don't have time to meditate. And I can get in that cycle too, where I'm like, I really would like to meditate today, but I just don't have time. I'm too busy. But anyone who actually spends time meditating is so aware of how much more efficiently they work when they're, you know, going about their business. Like a lot of people feel like they gain time by putting that, you know, even 20 minutes aside a day just to sit with yourself. And for me, it's the same going outdoors and foraging. Like when I go out and do that, it's such a meditation, such a contemplative time for me. It really, then when I go and work, it just all pours out so much more readily.
Why London then? Because that seems like,
Yeah.
you know, one of the biggest cities we have.
Yeah. I was
on
in
the
rural
planet.
Ireland for the last 3 years, so moving to London is a bit of a shock, but it does make a lot of sense in many ways. I think being in rural Ireland, I mean, for these passions has been amazing. But the reality of my life now is that I travel, you know, on a weekly or monthly basis to play concerts. And so, you know, getting on a bus for 3 hours to an airport all the time, instead of, you know, a place like London, you can kind of get anywhere. Um, so and also just in Ireland, I just didn't really have, both my wife and I just didn't really have much of a social network or community. You know, there were lots of people around that we can relate to on a very, very basic level, but for us as musicians and artists, there's so many more people here in London that we feel a little bit more on the same page with in that creative realm. And like my record label I work with most often is based here.
Well, which one? There's so many you work with.
Erase Tapes is the label I work with most
yes.
often these days. But yeah, so yeah, and there's another musician friend of mine that I've been getting really close with over the last year. So he was a good reason I wanted to move here. We wanted to work more together. So yeah, logistically it makes a lot of sense for us right now, I think. And actually, I was surprised with how much foraging I've been able to do here in London since moving over. I mean, you know, blackberries are everywhere, as you can imagine. They just kind of take over. And there's always a little hidden alleyway that's overgrown with blackberries. But, you know, things like nettle and dandelion, these grow everywhere as well. Plantain, and then elderberries. I was harvesting a bunch of elderberries this autumn and making elderberry syrup, which I just drank the last of today. It was very sad, but so delicious.
That's going to be a good tonic for colds, right? Elderberry.
Yeah, elderberry is really good for the immune system. So as this transition happens into the fall, if you're in one of these climates that has a big transition like that, it's so helpful to have something like that to just kind of back you up a little bit.
So are you planning to continue to be in Europe for a while, or is it sort of open-ended, or do you still tour in the States as much?
You know, I've never really had much success in the States. And I don't really know why that is. You know, partially is just because I've been here, I guess, and I've toured mostly here, so I've met mostly people here. But it's just weird. I don't often get reached out to by people in America, and what has kept my career going is people reaching out to me. You know, like I reach out to, and I show appreciation for other artists that I admire and all that. But then things just tend to sort of happen organically for me. Someone will say, "Hey, will you do some music for this film score? Will you come on this tour?" And I'm like, "Sure, yes." And
it's karma, man. Yeah.
So I'm so busy with that stuff that I've never had the time really to say, "Okay, now I want to figure out how to tour in America." But it's sad for me because I'd love to do more there, but it just hasn't happened yet.
Well, you're a young guy, and your output is so creative and diverse. I have no doubt there will be more and more experiences all over the world for you. I mean, things have changed so much with music, right? In the last couple of years, too. The audience themselves is all over the place and growing every month. New countries coming online to Spotify and so forth.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been really intrigued by what you're doing because just doing a bit more research since we got in touch about this Ram Dass project. I'm intrigued by what kind of. I feel like the world that you travel, the circuit that you perform in, is a little different than the circuit and the world that I'm in. I don't know how illusionary that is, but I'm really curious about the little niche that you've carved out for yourself. And it seems like, I don't know. I think I grew up feeling like anything in the new age category was just really cheesy.
Well, me too.
But,
I never set out to do that, and I still don't self-identify. Matter of fact, the only reason the Ram Dass record has been coming out in the new age category is because we thought it'd be cool to have Ram Dass have a shot at a Grammy.
Right.
That's the only category it fit into.
Right.
I was like,
but
there really wasn't
also,
another one.
But I feel like, people like you, and maybe even a little bit myself, we're infusing this sort of new age category with a new life. Because and actually now there's a lot of music that I may have thought was cheesy when I was a kid that now I think is really beautiful. So,
Well, I'm sure the grass is always greener. The way it happened for me is just a quick story along. I'm sure my listeners have heard a lot of this before, but
well, you can cut it out for them. I'd like to hear it.
Well, basically, I started from psilocybin as well, but that actually directly started my music in East Forest because I had a powerful experience like you. Mine was in 2008.
Okay.
And I'd had other experiences in my life, but I had one really seminal one, and it was with music, and I had been writing music for me to use in that experience. Like that was the only reason I was making music. I was like, I want to meditate to this on mushrooms.
Yeah.
And I didn't really that was just kind of a side thing I was doing. And I did it. And anyway, it changed my life. And it just really, things started to unfold from that, where like I had friends inviting me to begin to guide ceremonies with people taking psilocybin, and I would provide the music live. And I didn't have, sort of like your first tour, I'd never done it, and I didn't know anything about it, nor did I have a way to do it live. So I had to develop it, and that's why I started looping, and that's why I started bringing in the field recordings, and that's why it was long form and sort of slow, and I just trial and error was figuring out just what worked best in the space for people so that they had a positive experience. That was it. And after many years of this, you start to kind of create a musical language, and that is now pretty unique sounding, but it's because it came from a very specific purpose. And then I branched out from there. And like you, I don't play as many instruments as you, but I had a lot of interest in different styles. And so inevitably some of my records would go in this way and that way, whether it was lyrics or beats or ambient or more classical. And people never knew what genre to put it in. And I know for you too, that's a thing. And I'm always like, well, me too, but I don't know. I think I had good taste. Like the kind of music I like is like your music and a lot of the people you've worked with. I mean, all the stuff we all know. It's like, I like good music. And I just like music that really, I like music that really moves me. It's what's the stuff that kind of is an emotional connection for me when I listen to it. And that's the kind of music I like to make because that's how I like to feel. And some people called it new age, some people called it electronic, some people called it classical, some people called it whatever, pop, ambient. And I was just like, take your pick. But the yoga world picked it up first. And it was not my doing, shall I say. Like I didn't know anything about that world. And that was a new thing in the States where they started having these festivals with like music festival meets yoga festival. And my first outing was being hired by one of those companies to come to multiple festivals, and that kind of kickstarted things. And so that world has been a big part of my audience. But I've always wanted to make music to reach like everyone. And even though it's deeply spiritualized, just because that's what my life, I suppose, has become, but I would say no more than you. I just talk about it a lot because I can't stop talking about it. I'm not the mushroom guy, but somehow I've become the mushroom guy because I do believe it's important, and I find myself, I'm constantly talking about it, even though I don't do it that often. but now I'm like in this world of like this new psychedelic research and music and creating music for this and just exploring it, because sort of like yourself, we can do this now, right? We can just do as musicians what we want and what excites us and release it. And there's people out there, you can make an audience on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's so cool, man. And I really like that you say, I like how you described, you know, when you first started off playing live, sort of trying to figure out what makes the listeners happy. I think that's a very lovely way to come at it. You know, I think there's a lot of artists who are like, you know, I don't care about the audience. I just do what I like, you know, and that's fine too. And sometimes that works out great. But, you know, I think over the years, I've, you know, I see what I do as my service to the world. It's like the thing it's the thing that I'm useful for, you know, because the number of times that I've tried to say, okay, I'm done with music, I'm going to do something else now. And it's like the universe kicks me in the ass and says, no, you need to go do this. You know, other things just never work out and music opportunities just pour in. So at some point I just realized, okay, this is what I'm being asked to do. So yeah, I really try to approach it from that way as well, to, you know, like, how can I best serve these people who are listening? But I, you know, at the same time, I like to provoke people and poke at them a little bit sometimes too. You know, maybe don't let them get too comfortable, or when they get comfortable, just give them a little bit of a wink, jab.
and do you feel, Peter, that with your music, do you have a feeling you are trying to engender in people specifically, or any sort of agenda with it?
No, I wouldn't dare try to put that into words. I don't think. You know, if I could describe it, it would just be awe. You know, I really like. I
love that.
I would consider it such a success if I play a show and people feel awe-inspired. You know, they're sort of wide-eyed and, you know, happy. But that can come in so many different ways, you know. But I like to surprise people a lot. I really like to, you know, throw something in, whether it's in the middle of a song or the middle of a set, that just kind of surprises people a bit. That's really important for me.
Yeah, I definitely sense that from your music, and I think it was something I was speaking to or trying to speak to at the beginning. I think I was saying irreverency, but that felt pejorative. It's not irreverent. It's there's a joyousness or a lightness to it, and you do have that element of surprise, and you take corners sometimes, and it's fun. It's an element of fun.
Yeah, absolutely, having a bit of fun, but also, you know, I love these transitions from like light and playful to just like deep, sorrowful, or, you know, contemplative. I love this contrast, you know, between the dark and the light, and, you know, the funny and the sad and all that. So yeah. But, you know, I'm very grateful for anyone who takes the time to listen as well. So I ultimately, I always try to bring it back around and serve them well. But yeah, I think for me, you know, the things that reward me most are the things that I have to struggle a little bit for. If it's made too easy for me, then I don't appreciate it as much, you know. Yeah, I think that little bit of struggle or confusion can be make the clarity all that more clear when it is clear, you know.
It's the grist for the mill. I mean, are you someone that tends to say yes to things, or someone who will take risks even when you're like, how the hell would I do that?
Yeah, I've always had a really hard time saying no. And, you know, sometimes it's to my detriment. I'm definitely better at it now than 10 years ago. Now I can pick and choose a little bit more what I want to do, but still I'm so grateful when anyone reaches out to me, you know, like,
I understand that.
And, yeah, and I really like, I'm a bit of a workaholic as well. I always love to just work on stuff. Um, so yeah, I do say yes a lot.
So, what is it you're working on now? What's coming up for you besides this? I don't know when people will be listening to this, but the
Yeah,
rework you did for the Ramdas record will be out on November 15th,
that's right.
2019,
That's right.
digitally.
Yeah, I've done a couple remixes lately, and that's been fun. It's been nice to have a couple of them at the same time, of kind of deconstructing someone else's
Yeah.
material and
Get
then
into the
putting
flow.
your
Yeah.
own creative spin on it. And I've got several other projects of my own. I'm about to do a little tour here in the UK, which was it was some music that I originally got asked to make for a set of murals that was in a gallery. So I wrote the music for these murals. I actually turned the murals into like a graphic score. So, you know, this color is this note and this shape is this instrument. And so
It's fantastic.
the murals became a score, and I wrote and performed this piece of music there. And I fell in love with the project so much. I thought, I want to perform this elsewhere. So I'm currently, just before I spoke to you, I was trying to put together a slideshow presentation that of this artwork and the whole story behind it that I can share while I present this music on this tour that starts this weekend. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then next year I'm releasing a new album of sing songs, like folky type songs. So I'm kind of gearing up for that and figuring out how the whole thing is going to go. You know, which song will I make a video for, and you know, all that sort of stuff, which is really fun. And I also have been. I was prompted a couple weeks ago by a family friend in Ireland who told me that there's a serious lack of books on Irish edible foods. And it really got me thinking. I've been starting to formulate some ideas for a book about wild foods. So I don't know if or when I'll get there, but it's been on my mind a lot lately. And maybe saying it here now will keep me to it somehow. That would be nice.
I love all these music things that are sort of synesthetic, you know, that involve tastes or smells, and that stuff I've played with a lot too. And I just love it, especially when it gets site specific, how you perform it. Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
What are you working on at the moment?
We are wrapping up these reworks throughout the end of the year, and it's been a very fluid process. So some of them, such as yourselves, you make it so easy. On me, you just deliver something. And some of them, like Laraji's, I mixed it for him, and then others I might sort of produce and help. And so that's kind of happening right now, and we'll do that through the end of the year. And then I made a record called Music for Mushrooms, a soundtrack for the Psychedelic Practitioner that I released this year. It's a 5-hour record for. It was intended to be used in the therapeutic setting for people that go on psilocybin journeys. And it was a live record that I recorded in a ceremony, and I just sort of turned it into a release. And I'm releasing a 1-hour version of it next year. So I'm just more in that phase like you of like making vinyl and getting that buttoned up. But other than that, I'm not sure what 2020 is going to hold. I've got some touring going on. I'm going to China for the first time.
Yeah, you mentioned. I was in China when you told me.
Oh, right. How did that go?
It was great, actually. You know, I was in Macau, which is known as the Las Vegas of China. So it's all casinos, and it was quite surreal.
Wow.
But the guy who put on the show was the Macau International Music Festival, and every year they try to invite like one artist that's like a little bit more obscure or experimental. So I was that artist this year, and so but it turned out to be really lovely, but definitely a very surreal place. Where are you going in China?
Outside Shanghai. It's a festival called the At One Festival. I think it's sort of a wellness-based festival.
Okay, yeah. Well, that'll be interesting for you.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
And so that's right around the corner here next week. And then I do a lot of one-off things, and then I'll probably do something. I'm going out to Australia for the first time too in February. So that's a big trip for me.
Wow. Yeah. So is music your kind of full-time gig these days?
Yeah. So for me, it's been full-time for about 5 years.
Okay.
4 or 5 years. Yeah. And it's, I mean, I'm sure you know how it goes. So it's sort of there's always things to do, let alone making music.
and what's it like where you are spending time in Utah now?
So I spend time with my girlfriend Rada in Boise a lot.
Okay.
And that's one because she's there and her business is there and her kids are there. There's also an airport there. So when you said take a bus in Ireland 3 some hours, I was like, dude, I know I have to go 4.5 hours from here to the airport. Okay. So it's not a very sustainable thing to do like full-time 12 months.
No.
And I have to go over a mountain in the winter. It's like sometimes you can't. And it's just,
after a few of those, you're like, what the hell am I doing?
Exactly. I was last year in the winter. I had to get up at like 3:30 in the morning to get to the airport by like 11 a.m.
Wow.
And everything was frozen. I couldn't open like compartments and I had to blow air through the lines and then get my car and it was snowing. And I was thinking what the hell am I doing?
That's just silly.
Dangerous.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But I'm here because it's the most beautiful and spiritual place I've ever been in my life. And it's endlessly humbling and inspiring. It's such a rich, raw place that it just makes me feel the most alive as a human being. And so that's why I do all these.
It's a good reason to be there.
So that's why
I bet there's a lot of
great
wild foods around there that we could forage.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have you down sometime, and we can go get our friend Dave Holliday, and he can take us out to live off the land. We'll be in a cave. We'll make an album in a cave. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Cool, man. Thank you. I really appreciate you giving us the time.
Yeah,
and I can't wait for everyone to hear your work. And it's been great just to be able to get to know you a little better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for reaching out about this Ram Dass thing, and good luck with all the rest of those remixes and all that. And yeah, man, I'm sure we'll cross paths somewhere at some point. Maybe it'll be like in Antarctica or something. First ever
the festival,
wellness festival in Antarctica.
For global warming, I could see it happening.
Yeah.
Just stream it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Take care, Krishna.
Well, thank you, Peter. It was a real treat for me to be able to get to know him a bit better and find all those points of connection and kind of go full circle and bring it all back together from that first email I sent him so many years ago. This track you are hearing in the background is the track. It's Home, the Peter Broderick rework that is out on all platforms, so go check it out. Hear it in high fidelity. It was mastered by Huntley Miller, who mastered the whole Ram Dass record, and he's a genius, and he made it sound just super awesome and incredible. So thank you, Huntley. Like I said, this week is a maybe, but if about a podcast episode, but we'll see. Either way, I will catch you soon in December, if not this upcoming week. You guys keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit, but if you do it with grace.
spiritual path.